The night was meant to be perfect. It was the annual Sterling Foundation Gala, a night when the city's most powerful and glamorous people came together, all dressed in their finest to raise millions for children in need. The imperial grand ballroom glowed with hundreds of candles, dazzling crystal chandeliers, and the golden warmth of wealth. Outside, the winter wind whipped at the doors, but inside was a world of laughter, sparkling dresses, and secrets hidden behind diamond smiles. Everyone who was anyone was here. Politicians, billionaires, celebrities, socialites, hungry for the next big scandal. It was the kind of night that would be splashed across magazine covers and whispered about at brunch for weeks. But no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted the explosion that was about to shatter the illusion of perfection. In the middle of this glamour, Daniel Sterling, the host and CEO of Sterling Dynamics, played the charming king. He was a man built for attention. Tall, devastatingly handsome, with that rare smile that seemed both sincere and dangerous. On his arm tonight was not his wife, but Sabrina King, a striking woman at least 10 years younger, known for her scandalous beauty and social media fame. Her lips were painted red, her dress a flash of scarlet silk hugging her every curve. She laughed loudly at Daniel's jokes, clinging to him as if staking her claim. The ballroom buzzed with rumors. Where was Emily Sterling, Daniel's wife? Some said she was home, too pregnant and tired to attend. Others said she was out of town. But the most vicious whispers questioned whether she even mattered anymore. Then, at exactly 8:37 p.m., the band faded into silence as Daniel led Sabrina onto the dance floor. He didn't just hold her, he paraded her, his hand at her waist, twirling her beneath the lights in full view of investors, friends, even family. The arrogance was breathtaking. For weeks there had been quiet speculation about his work dinners and late-night meetings. But this was something else. This was war. Camera phones lit up. The city's top gossip columnist scribbled furiously in her notebook. The foundation's oldest patrons exchanged horrified looks, but no one dared confront Daniel. Not yet. Sabrina relished the moment, raising her head, smiling slyly at every lens pointed her way. Suddenly, the grand doors at the back of the ballroom opened with a soft but unmistakable creak. A single figure stood framed in the light. Emily Sterling. Every head turned. Even the orchestra seemed to stop breathing. Emily, 6 months pregnant, walked slowly and deliberately into the room. She wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered with each step, her baby bump visible but her posture unbroken. Her dark hair was swept into a low chignon, diamond earrings sparkling at her ears. She looked every inch the woman who once ran this room, the woman Daniel had promised to cherish for better or worse. But tonight, Emily's eyes held no fear, only calm, only steel. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as she glided toward the dance floor. Murmurs rippled. Even Sabrina faltered, her laughter dying in her throat as she realized this was no meek housewife. This was the real power in the room. Daniel froze, caught mid-spin. For a brief, electric second, he locked eyes with his wife. There was history there. Years of love, sacrifice, heartbreak, but also something new. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. Emily didn't look away. She let the cameras catch every emotion flickering across her face. The betrayal, the hurt, the absolute resolve. Her voice rang out, calm and controlled, but loud enough for every guest to hear. "Don't stop on my account," she said, her words slicing through the tension. "This is your big night, isn't it?" A ripple of shock ran through the room. Some guests gasped. Others whispered, already composing tomorrow's headlines in their minds. Emily stopped at the edge of the dance floor, never once flinching, never once shrinking from the spectacle. She was not here to beg. She was not here to fight for Daniel. She was here to claim her place, to stand tall in the face of betrayal, and to let the world know she would not be erased. Sabrina, flustered, tried to cling tighter to Daniel, but he gently pulled away, his charm cracking as embarrassment crept into his features. For the first time, he looked small, like a child caught in a lie. Emily's best friend, Claire, hovered by the bar, her fists clenched in quiet support. Daniel's mother, standing by the charity auction, covered her mouth in horror. Even the foundation's old chairman, who'd known Emily since her wedding day, shook his head in disbelief. In this room of sharks, only one woman swam with real purpose. Emily didn't say another word. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any accusation, her presence more powerful than any threat. The city's elite had witnessed something rare. Grace under fire, dignity in the face of cruelty. As the orchestra picked up a slow, mournful waltz, Emily turned and walked to the edge of the ballroom, standing near the tall windows overlooking the frozen city. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of it all. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the fear for her unborn child. But beneath the pain was something else, a promise, a new resolve. Because Emily Sterling was no ordinary woman, she was not a victim. And this night, the night meant to break her, was only the beginning. If you asked the people in that grand ballroom who Emily Sterling really was, most would have offered a polite smile and the blandest of answers. She's Daniel Sterling's wife, isn't she? Always so sweet, so pleasant. Some might add, didn't she used to work as a lawyer or something? A few would mention her understated style, her refusal to compete with the other wives in charity auction bids, or how she always remembered the names of the waitstaff and their children. But no one, not even Daniel, had ever really seen Emily. She was 32, with the kind of natural beauty that didn't demand attention. Soft brown eyes that glowed with warmth when she smiled, dark lashes, hair like polished chestnut, skin that seemed to hold the memory of childhood summers. Her voice was gentle, never raised, but when she did speak, people found themselves listening without meaning to. She had a calmness that, in another world, would have been mistaken for passivity. Yet beneath that calm was something hard as iron. Emily was born Emily Tran, the only child of Lean, a Vietnamese immigrant who cleaned houses for a living in Chicago's South Side. They lived in a cramped studio apartment, her mother working dawn to midnight, taking any job to keep Emily in good schools. Her father had left when Emily was a baby, a ghost, a name on a faded photograph, someone her mother refused to speak of. Life was a battle, but Lean fought with a quiet pride and taught her daughter to never let anyone see her cry. From an early age, Emily learned to be invisible when it mattered, to blend in at school, to ignore the taunts about her second-hand clothes, to keep her head down and her grades high. Her reward was scholarship after scholarship, first to a private high school, then to the city's best university. Emily devoured books, especially law and history. She dreamed of fighting for people like her mother, of changing the world in small, practical ways. But love changed everything. She met Daniel Sterling in her junior year of college. He was older, already interning at a consulting firm, ambitious and magnetic. Daniel noticed Emily first at a study group in the library, drawn by her sharp wit and the laughter in her eyes. He offered her a ride home during a winter blizzard, and that night, over cheap takeout and stories of childhood, they fell for each other in a way that felt fated. For a while, they were inseparable, walking through campus hand in hand, making plans for a future built on dreams and determination. Daniel was ambitious, sure, but he was also attentive. He brought her flowers just because, wrote notes tucked in her lunch, called her his miracle. When he proposed on the steps of the old courthouse, Emily thought she'd found her forever. After graduation, Emily entered law school. Daniel began climbing the corporate ladder. They rented a tiny apartment downtown and scraped by, supporting each other through sleepless nights and endless work. Emily passed the bar. Daniel was promoted. When he landed a position at Sterling Dynamics, their life began to transform. Better apartment, nicer cars, trips abroad, a taste of the world she'd only seen in movies. But every step forward came with a price. Daniel's career devoured his time. Emily put off her own ambitions to support the family. She managed their finances, arranged business dinners, learned to charm his boss's wives. After years of struggling with fertility, they finally celebrated a miracle. Emily was pregnant. For Daniel, the pregnancy was another milestone, something to announce on social media. For Emily, it was everything she'd ever wanted, the hope of a family she'd lost as a child, the chance to break the cycle of loneliness. Yet even as she decorated the nursery, Emily felt the chill of distance growing between them. Daniel worked late. He stopped asking about her day, stopped touching her hand in the dark. He grew impatient with her caution, mocked her budgeting, belittled her dreams of returning to law. Emily blamed herself. Maybe she wasn't glamorous enough. Maybe she was too careful, too plain. But Emily Sterling was not weak. In secret, she kept investing the small inheritance left by her mother, building a portfolio under her maiden name. She took online courses on finance and tech. She networked with old professors, former clients, friends in the legal world. She read every contract Daniel brought home, sometimes saving his company from disaster without ever asking for thanks. There was another secret, too. A letter in a locked box, unopened for years. When her father died abroad, he left Emily a fortune, tied up in trusts and assets she never told Daniel about. It was enough money to buy her freedom 100 times over, but she left it untouched. She wanted her marriage to be about love, not power. Yet tonight, all those years of silence, sacrifice, and humility felt like chains she'd forged for herself. Standing at the edge of the ballroom, Emily realized something profound. She was done shrinking. She was done being just the wife. She was more than her pain, more than the sum of Daniel's choices. The little girl from the South Side was still here, and she was about to claim every ounce of strength her mother had given her. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, feeling her child move. "You are not going to be raised in fear," she promised, her whisper fierce. "You are not going to watch your mother disappear." Tonight, Emily Sterling was stepping into the light, and no one, not Daniel, not the city, not even her own fear, could stop her. If the heart of the city had a single pulse, tonight it beat inside the Imperial Grand Ballroom. The building itself was a monument to excess. Gilded columns, marble floors polished to a mirror sheen, and a ceiling painted with scenes of angels and battles, as if to remind everyone that every social event was a war. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the subtle, metallic tang of ambition. Waiters glided through the room like chess pieces, balancing flutes of champagne and tiny bites of caviar, never lingering long enough to overhear anything truly dangerous. It was the annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala, ostensibly for children in need, but in reality, it was the city's most ruthless game of power. The guest list was a who's who of elite society: tech tycoons, hedge fund billionaires, senators, reality TV stars, and old money families whose fortunes had outlived their scandals. Press passes had been auctioned for weeks. Every major gossip site had a reporter here, and the silent auction included art so rare that guests whispered about security details and insurance policies. No one threw a party like the Sterlings. Emily had designed the night herself. Every candle, every tablecloth, every floral arrangement of white peonies and orchids was chosen with care. She knew the best way to control a room was to control its mood. That power, she realized now, had always belonged to her. Not to Daniel. At the far end of the ballroom, a string quartet played, their music swelling and ebbing with the rise and fall of conversation. Laughter sparkled beneath the chandeliers, but there was a tension in the air, as if everyone sensed that something was about to rupture. Rumors moved through the crowd like shadows. Some said Daniel had been spotted with a mystery woman at the Four Seasons last week. Others noticed that Emily's name was absent from the program as co-host for the first time in years. In a corner, Daniel Sterling held court, his charisma turned up to full wattage. Investors hung on his every word, politicians patted him on the back, old friends recounted stories from college days. But those who looked closer saw the cracks, his laugh a little too forced, his gaze always flickering toward the grand entrance, as if waiting for someone or something he both feared and desired. Sabrina King floated at his side. Her laughter was too loud, her smile too sharp. She worked the room as expertly as any politician, introducing herself as Daniel's partner to anyone who asked, ignoring the wives who sized her up with a mix of curiosity and contempt. Sabrina was dressed to be remembered. Crimson silk, high slit, diamonds on her neck and wrists. She played the role of future queen with gleeful abandon. Elsewhere, Emily's allies watched the drama with mounting dread. Claire, her best friend and former roommate, hovered by the bar, her eyes never straying far from Daniel and Sabrina. Across the room, Mrs. Sterling, Daniel's mother, looked stricken, her hands trembling as she sipped her wine. She remembered a time when Emily was the only woman who could calm Daniel's storms, when Sabrina was just another ambitious face in a sea of social climbers. In the kitchen, staff whispered about the unfolding scandal. Emily had always known their names, their families, and their dreams. Some wept quietly for her. Others were just grateful for the overtime pay and for the certainty that tonight's drama would boost their tips. But where was Emily? Some guests speculated she was hiding in shame. Others believed she was sick or too tired from pregnancy to endure another night of small talk and forced smiles. The truth was, Emily was upstairs in a private dressing room, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the quartet below. She stared into the antique mirror. The face that stared back was both hers and not hers, a little older, more tired, but with an intensity in her eyes she'd never seen before. She wore the midnight blue gown she'd chosen months ago, before she knew about Daniel and Sabrina, before the world had shifted beneath her feet. Her belly was round and firm beneath the silk, a visible reminder of everything she had fought for. Her phone buzzed on the vanity, a message from Claire. "You don't have to do this. You don't owe anyone anything tonight." Emily typed back, hands steady. "I do. For myself. For the baby. I need them to see me." She stood, smoothing the dress, and took a deep breath. She thought of her mother, of the long nights spent scrubbing floors and patching clothes. She thought of her unborn child, of the promise she had made to never disappear. She thought of Daniel, of the man she loved and the stranger he had become. At exactly 8:45 p.m., Emily Sterling walked out of the dressing room, her head held high, and descended the grand staircase. Light caught in her hair, in the tears she refused to shed, in the quiet fire burning in her chest. Every step was a declaration. "I am not afraid." Below, the quartet fell silent, one note hanging in the air like a question. The crowd turned, a wave of attention cresting over the room. Some faces showed shock, others showed relief or shame. Daniel's eyes went wide, Sabrina's grip tightened on his arm. Emily reached the bottom step and paused, letting the silence stretch. She met Daniel's gaze, then Sabrina's, then the rest of the room. She felt their judgment, their pity, their hunger for drama. She let it all wash over her. The lights, the music, the beauty, none of it mattered now. The only thing that mattered was her own courage. Tonight, the gala was not Daniel's, it was hers. If the ballroom was a theater, then Daniel Sterling was determined to play the leading man, no matter who got hurt. For years, he'd chased power and adoration with the hunger of someone who'd grown up feeling small. Daniel's father was a junior executive who never made it past middle management. His mother, desperate for acceptance, always measured success by other people's standards. As a child, Daniel learned that admiration was fleeting and love was conditional. So, he chased bigger things, the best schools, the most ambitious friends, the shiniest accolades. And now, standing at the center of the gala, with Sabrina King on his arm, Daniel believed he'd finally arrived. To the world, Daniel Sterling was a story of triumph. Handsome, ambitious, and charming, he built Sterling Dynamics into a tech powerhouse. He graced magazine covers, gave talks at global conferences, and signed deals in penthouses with city views. But beneath the tuxedo and the easy smile was a man whose ambition was slowly rotting into entitlement. His marriage to Emily had once been his anchor. He admired her strength, her quiet wisdom, her ability to see through the noise and focus on what really mattered. She was the partner who steadied him during the company's lean years, who read contracts and found errors even his lawyers missed. She made their house a home. But when the company took off, Daniel's attention wandered, first to work, then to other distractions. He craved validation that Emily, with her gentle ways and quiet confidence, didn't give him in the same intoxicating rush. Enter Sabrina King. Sabrina had always wanted the world to see her. Raised in a small town by a single mother who worked double shifts, Sabrina learned early that beauty could open doors if you were ruthless enough to walk through them. She moved to the city at 18, waitressing in the mornings and building her social media following by night. She styled herself as an influencer, all sharp cheekbones and bold opinions, catching the attention of local brands, photographers, and eventually men with money. Sabrina's relationship with Daniel began as a whisper at a tech event. A compliment here, a stolen glance there. She made him feel young, desired, rebellious. For Sabrina, Daniel was both a ticket and a challenge. She listened, laughed, encouraged his complaints about Emily, offered advice on how to be more visible, more bold, more deserving. She pushed Daniel to take risks, even as she quietly gathered intel on his habits and vulnerabilities. Sabrina didn't want to just be a mistress. She wanted to be the next Mrs. Sterling, with a seat at the table and the world at her feet. On the night of the gala, Sabrina played her role to perfection. She wore a red dress, hand-picked for the cameras, knowing exactly how the light would catch it. Her jewelry sparkled with rented diamonds, but her confidence was all her own. She clung to Daniel, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes, introducing herself as his partner to every guest, each word a dagger aimed at Emily's place in the world. Daniel's friends, especially those who had known Emily since college, shifted uncomfortably as Sabrina made her rounds. The old money wives, experts at reading subtext, traded looks. The new girl was here to stay, at least for tonight. Some men congratulated Daniel quietly, as if Sabrina was just another acquisition. Others whispered about his recklessness, warning that public humiliation could be disastrous, not just for his marriage, but for his brand. But Daniel was too deep into the performance to notice. His ego, swollen by months of Sabrina's admiration, refused to consider consequences. Tonight was his victory lap. At 9:10 p.m., Daniel decided to make his move. The orchestra paused, and he took the microphone from the bandleader, tapping it for silence. Sabrina pressed closer, a rehearsed smile on her lips. "Thank you all for joining us," Daniel began, his voice steady, almost triumphant. "I want to recognize someone very special who has supported me through thick and thin. Sabrina King, my partner and the woman who inspires me every day." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Some guests exchanged glances of disbelief. Daniel's mother nearly dropped her wine glass. Sabrina's eyes sparkled with satisfaction, but even she felt the tremor of risk in the air. The announcement was a public declaration, an erasure of Emily, a shot fired in front of witnesses. Emily stood near the grand staircase, her expression unreadable. Her hands rested protectively on her belly, but she made no move to leave, no move to confront. She simply watched, letting the silence after Daniel's words stretch thin as wire. In that stillness, the truth hung in the air. This was not a slip, not a drunken mistake, but a calculated act of betrayal. Daniel, emboldened by his own audacity, stepped off the stage and led Sabrina onto the dance floor. The cameras swiveled to follow them, flashes popping like fireworks. Sabrina pressed herself against Daniel, her laughter echoing through the cavernous room. But Daniel's high didn't last. As he spun Sabrina under the chandeliers, he caught sight of Emily, radiant and unbowed, surrounded by friends and strangers who now looked at him not with envy, but with judgment. For the first time, the applause sounded hollow. He saw in a moment of clarity the price of what he had done, not just the marriage he'd shattered, but the respect he'd lost. Sabrina felt it too, a flicker of doubt beneath the triumph. She realized that for all her ambition, she was a tool in Daniel's story, a pawn in a game that was spinning out of control. The attention, the whispers, the jealousy she'd craved, suddenly they felt heavy, even dangerous. The villainy of that night was not in the affair, or even the humiliation, but in the spectacle. The way Daniel and Sabrina had used love and loyalty as weapons, forgetting that every game played in public comes with a cost. And as the music swelled and the night went on, Daniel and Sabrina would learn that no betrayal, no matter how carefully planned, can ever truly control what happens next. The first seconds after Daniel's public declaration hung in the air like a slow-motion car crash. Everyone watching, no one breathing, the only sound the hum of the chandelier's electricity and the faint click of camera shutters capturing the moment. Emily felt every eye in the ballroom swing toward her. For years, she had learned to manage the attention. At Daniel's side, she was graceful, controlled, quietly charming, but never had she been at the center of a spectacle like this. Daniel, the man she had built her life around, had just erased her existence with a few well-chosen words on a night she herself had spent months planning. She stood at the base of the grand staircase, hands on her belly, chin held high. Her vision blurred for a moment. Was this really happening? Was this her life? But she refused to let her face crumble. Inside, her heart was breaking, but on the outside, she remained unbroken. She heard someone whisper her name. She heard a guest gasp, "Isn't she pregnant?" The orchestra tried to pick up a waltz, but the music faltered as if the instruments themselves were in mourning. Sabrina, triumphant, smiled for the cameras, clinging to Daniel with one manicured hand, the other flashing a diamond bracelet Emily herself had once worn. Sabrina's gaze flickered, just for a second, in Emily's direction, a glimmer of triumph mixed with unease. Sabrina hadn't expected Emily to show up. She hadn't expected her to look so calm, so strong, so present. But Emily was done playing the background. She took a step forward, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. The guests parted, conversations dying mid-sentence. Some of the city's most powerful women looked at her with open pity. Others watched with satisfaction, as if waiting for a scene, maybe a slap, a scream, a fainting spell. Emily gave them nothing. As Daniel and Sabrina danced, the ballroom's energy changed. Investors whispered to their wives, sponsors looked nervously at their phones, and board members of the Sterling Foundation began to murmur about scandal and damage control. The charity's oldest patron, a woman who had mentored Emily, stared daggers at Daniel, shaking her head in silent disgust. Claire, Emily's loyal friend, squeezed through the crowd and stood by her side. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice tight with tears. "I'm not," Emily said, her voice low but steady. "But I will be. I need to see this through." At that moment, Daniel spun Sabrina around and caught sight of Emily, really saw her, maybe for the first time all night. His smile wavered. There was a flicker of confusion, perhaps even regret. But it was too late. The damage was done. The narrative, once his to control, now belonged to everyone in the room. The press circled, their phones at the ready. Flashes erupted, capturing the three of them, Daniel, Sabrina, and Emily, in a single, heartbreaking frame. Tomorrow's headlines were already writing themselves. Pregnant wife humiliated as billionaire husband parades mistress at charity gala. The moment stretched, unbearably long, until someone in the crowd, perhaps fueled by too much champagne or too much outrage, called out, "What about your wife, Daniel?" There was a gasp. Daniel's face flushed red. Sabrina's grip tightened, her expression faltering for the first time. Emily did not flinch. She raised her chin, refusing to let shame claim her. "Yes, Daniel," she said, her voice clear and ringing through the stunned silence. "What about your wife?" A ripple of shock ran through the ballroom. No one had expected her to speak, least of all Daniel. His mouth opened, but no words came. Sabrina glanced at the crowd, suddenly realizing the script was slipping from her hands. Emily turned to the crowd. "Thank you all for supporting the Sterling Foundation," she said, her voice unwavering. "I am proud of the work we've accomplished together, and I am proud to stand here tonight, not as a victim, but as a woman who refuses to be erased." A beat of silence. Then someone started to clap. Just one person at first, then another. The applause grew, awkward but real. In that instant, the tide shifted. The shame that Daniel and Sabrina had tried to throw on Emily slid off her shoulders and landed instead on their own. Daniel tried to regain his composure. "Let's all enjoy the evening. There's no need for drama," he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. It was clear to everyone now that this was not the story he had meant to tell. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Some guests left early, disgusted by the display. Others hovered near Emily, offering words of encouragement, silent apologies, or simply quiet respect. Claire never left her side, and even Daniel's mother approached, tears in her eyes, to apologize for her son's cruelty. As the gala wound down, Emily slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. She finally allowed herself to cry, silent, shuddering sobs, for the marriage that was over, for the humiliation she'd been forced to endure, for the child she would now raise alone. But as she wiped her tears, a strange calm settled over her. For the first time in years, she felt free. Inside, Daniel and Sabrina posed for a few more photos, but the energy had shifted. The admiration Daniel craved had turned to suspicion and gossip. Sabrina sensed it too. The crowd's hunger had turned, and the victory felt hollow. The night ended not in triumph, but in reckoning. Emily, standing on the cold balcony, looked out over the city lights and made herself a promise. She would not just survive this. She would rise from it, stronger than ever. They had tried to destroy her in public, but they had only awakened the power she had hidden for far too long. The city never really sleeps, but some nights it feels like you're the only one awake. That night, after the gala, Emily Sterling became just another shadow moving through the city's frozen streets, a pregnant woman in a silk gown, clutching her coat tight against the wind, walking away from everything she had built, everything she thought she knew. She could still hear the echo of applause, see the camera flashes, feel the stares burning into her back as she slipped out the service entrance. There was no waiting car, no one calling her name. Her phone buzzed, but she let it go unanswered. Claire had offered to come with her, but Emily needed to be alone. She needed to feel the pain, let it soak into her bones so she could truly understand what she was surviving. She wandered, not sure where she was going. The city lights blurred through her tears. Her heels ached. The baby moved, a flutter, a gentle protest against her tension. She paused at a deserted bus stop, sinking onto the cold metal bench, breath steaming in the night air. For the first time, the reality of it all crashed over her. Daniel was gone. Her marriage was over. The man she had built her world around had publicly humiliated her and chosen another. She had lost not just her partner, but her identity. Emily replayed the night in her mind. Daniel's face when he announced Sabrina as his partner, the crowd's silence, the sympathy in Claire's eyes, the cold judgment of the city's elite. Every memory felt like a fresh cut. Even now, her mind tried to make excuses for him, but her heart refused to accept them. This was not a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. Total, deliberate, and merciless. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away. Let the world see. Let the world know she hurt. There was a freedom in honesty, in finally letting herself grieve. A cab driver slowed down, gestured at her. "You okay, miss?" She shook her head, unable to speak, and he drove on. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The cold seeped into her bones, but she welcomed it. Pain made her feel alive, reminded her she could still feel anything at all. The city continued around her. People stumbling out of bars, couples laughing arm in arm, a group of friends arguing over pizza. Life moved on, indifferent to her heartbreak. Emily's phone buzzed again, a text from her mother-in-law, apologizing for Daniel, asking if she was safe. Another from her old law school friend. "Saw the news. I'm so sorry. Call me anytime." Even Sabrina, in a bizarre twist, had posted a carefully worded note on social media. "No one deserves pain. Wishing healing for all." It was sickening. The wind picked up, and Emily pulled her coat tighter. The night was endless. She considered calling Claire, but shame stopped her. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to answer questions she couldn't face. Instead, she opened her phone and looked at old photos. Her and Daniel on their wedding day, the positive pregnancy test, the baby's first ultrasound. Every picture felt like a lie, a story that had been rewritten by Daniel's betrayal. Despair pressed down on her. The future she'd imagined, a family, a home filled with laughter, a child raised by two loving parents, was gone. In its place was a void so vast it threatened to swallow her whole. For a moment, she let herself wonder if she would ever recover, if she would ever be enough. A passing police car slowed, the officer inside giving her a concerned look. "Need any help, ma'am?" She shook her head, forced a tiny smile. "No, thank you. I just need to sit." Eventually, the cold became too much. Emily stood, legs shaky, and walked toward the nearest train station. She rode the empty subway home, the harsh lights making her feel even more exposed. Every stop felt like a lifetime. When she finally reached her building, she fumbled with her keys, hands numb, and stepped into the silence of her apartment. The place was untouched, perfect, staged, as if Daniel might walk in at any moment. She dropped her coat on the floor, not caring if it creased. She leaned against the door, sliding down until she was curled on the hardwood, arms wrapped around her knees. The baby moved again, and for the first time, Emily sobbed. It was not the elegant crying of the movies, but raw animal grief, deep, guttural, uncontrollable. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her child. "I'm so sorry." She cried for the life she'd lost, for the trust broken, for the fear of raising a child alone. She cried for the version of herself who believed love could conquer anything. The tears lasted until her throat hurt, until her body shook with exhaustion. She didn't know how long she stayed there, minutes, hours, maybe the whole night. At some point she crawled to the bedroom and climbed under the covers, still in her gown, too tired to care. The world outside faded. The baby kicked, reminding her that life would go on, whether she was ready or not. In that darkness, something shifted. The pain didn't lessen, but beneath it, a tiny ember of resolve began to glow. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or how she would face it. But she knew she'd survived the worst night of her life, and she was still breathing. For now, that was enough. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, painting thin lines across Emily's bedroom floor. She hadn't really slept. The pain was still raw, every muscle in her body sore from crying. But as morning broke, something else was rising inside her, a deep, simmering clarity. She made herself get up, shower, and change into simple clothes. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks pale, but she looked in the mirror and saw something new. Not the broken wife from last night, but a woman who had survived. A mother, a fighter. Her phone, left on silent, showed dozens of unread messages. Sympathy from friends, shallow apologies from people she barely knew. Even a tone-deaf text from Daniel. "Sorry you took it that way. Hope you'll move on. We need to talk about the baby in the house." She stared at the screen, not sure whether to laugh or smash it. Daniel had always been transactional. Now he was treating her pain like a minor inconvenience. Instead of replying, she scrolled through her contacts and called someone she hadn't spoken to in months, her lawyer, Lila Fan. Lila had been her mentor in law school, a fierce advocate who never lost a fight. Emily explained what had happened at the gala, her voice shaking only once. Lila listened, silent and serious. "Emily, I told you years ago, you don't have to stay small for anyone. Especially not a man who would humiliate you like this," Lila said. "You have options, and you have more power than you think." Emily remembered the words, the secrets she'd kept even from Daniel. Her financial independence, the investments she'd quietly built, the inheritance her father had left her in trust, money Daniel never even knew existed. All those years Daniel complained about her playing it safe, mocking her for budgeting. He had no idea she was amassing wealth under her maiden name. After hanging up, Emily opened her safe, a small fireproof box tucked behind a row of old law books. Inside, she pulled out legal documents, investment accounts, trust deeds, property deeds in her name, and most importantly, a letter written in Vietnamese from her late father. She had never told Daniel the full story. Her father, who she thought had abandoned her, had actually spent his life building a business empire in Vietnam after her mother brought Emily to America. When he passed away, he left her as his sole heir. At first, Emily had left the money untouched. She wanted a marriage based on love, not power or money. But now, those carefully hidden resources were her shield, and possibly her sword. There was something else in the safe, a stack of letters from the charity boards she sat on, and a proposal from a tech startup she'd quietly advised that was about to go public. Emily smiled bitterly. She'd been called just a housewife. Yet she had helped more businesses thrive and had more investments than most of the men Daniel idolized. Mid-morning, Claire stopped by with bagels and a determined look. "Don't check social media. The tabloids are out for blood," she warned. "I'm not afraid of gossip," Emily said quietly. "I'm done hiding." Claire, sensing something different, watched as Emily calmly sorted paperwork and emailed her lawyer. "You're not just getting a divorce, are you?" Emily shook her head. "No, I'm making sure Daniel doesn't walk away clean. And I'm not letting him control the narrative." The phone rang again, this time from the CEO of the tech startup Emily had advised. "Emily, you changed our whole fundraising strategy. We're about to announce the IPO, and I want you as our official legal counsel and a board seat. Name your terms." The news hit her like a jolt. For years, Emily had stayed in the background, afraid that if she outshone Daniel, he'd resent her even more. But the world didn't just want her, they needed her skills. She could create a future for her child not rooted in someone else's last name, but in her own power. Word started to spread through the city's circles. The story was shifting. Reporters began to dig. Who was Emily Sterling, really? How had she paid for law school, built a portfolio, advised so many charities? Old friends and professors posted online, painting a different picture. Emily as a scholar, a strategist, a force. Daniel's phone blew up, investors growing uneasy. Sabrina tried to seize the limelight, but her social media posts were met with ridicule. You broke up a marriage and still lost the power. Emily's lawyer arranged a press statement. Mrs. Sterling is focused on her well-being and that of her unborn child. She asks for privacy and is grateful for the outpouring of support from the city and the business community. She will continue her charity work and will not be commenting further at this time. Behind closed doors, Daniel's world began to shake. Sterling Dynamics stock dipped after rumors of board discontent. Investors whispered about Daniel's judgment, comparing his reckless personal life with Emily's integrity and business acumen. In her apartment, Emily finally let herself feel a flicker of hope. She wasn't out of the woods. She would still have to battle for custody, for respect, for her own peace. But the truth was out. She had never needed Daniel's approval, or his money. She was, in her own right, a woman of substance, wealth, and influence. And for the first time, Emily realized her story was just beginning. Transformation doesn't begin with a new outfit or a haircut. It begins deep inside, a decision that enough is enough. Emily Sterling's rebirth started on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by legal papers, bank statements, and a lifetime's worth of self-doubt. It was there, as the morning light filtered through the curtains and the city below hustled on as if nothing had changed, that she made a promise to herself and to her unborn child. She would never be powerless again. In the days following the scandal, Emily allowed herself to rest, to grieve, and to recover. She took long walks in the park, letting the winter air clear her head. She ate proper meals, meditated, and listened to calming music, refusing to let the noise of the outside world drown her spirit. Slowly, the ache in her chest began to fade, replaced by a steady, simmering strength. She started by reclaiming her home. Daniel's things were boxed up and sent to storage. The photos of their wedding, the souvenirs from romantic vacations, all packed away, replaced by fresh flowers, art that inspired her, and reminders of her own accomplishments. She filled the nursery with books, bright colors, and soft blankets, visualizing a future filled with laughter and safety. Next, she took care of the practical. She met with her lawyer, ironed out the divorce paperwork, and drew up custody agreements that prioritized her child's happiness and stability. Emily was no longer willing to negotiate her dignity or her worth. But the real transformation was internal. For the first time, she confronted the stories she'd told herself for years, that she was only valuable if someone else loved her, that her ambitions were too big, her talents too much, her dreams too dangerous. She realized that shrinking herself to fit someone else's comfort had cost her everything. She decided, with a calm certainty, to take up space. Claire, her best friend, noticed the change immediately. "You're glowing," she said, one afternoon as they walked through a boutique. "It's not just the pregnancy. It's you." Emily smiled, touching her belly. "For the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Her wardrobe changed too, but not for the reasons people might expect. Emily didn't dress to impress Daniel or to compete with Sabrina. She chose clothes that made her feel powerful, beautiful, and true to herself. Tailored maternity dresses in bold colors, soft cashmere sweaters, jewelry passed down from her mother, and shoes that made her walk with confidence. Her hair, usually tied back in a low ponytail, now flowed freely or was swept into chic, effortless updos. The media noticed. Paparazzi caught her walking into her favorite cafe, radiant in emerald green, chatting with business partners and laughing with friends. Headlines began to shift. Emily Sterling steps out in style after gala betrayal. Fans applaud her grace under fire. But style was just the surface. The real shift was in her mindset. Emily stopped apologizing for her intelligence, for her opinions, for her success. When the tech startup officially went public, she attended the board meeting as the new legal counsel and key shareholder. In that glass-walled conference room, she held her head high, speaking with authority and insight that left even the most seasoned investors impressed. "Mrs. Sterling, it's a pleasure to have you on board," the CEO said, shaking her hand. "Call me Emily," she replied. "I work for my own name now." She accepted interviews, not to share the details of her private life, but to advocate for women's rights, financial literacy, and the importance of building your own security. "Never put your worth in someone else's hands," she said during a televised segment. "You have more power than you think." Social media exploded with support. Women from around the country messaged her, thanking her for speaking up, for refusing to be defined by humiliation, for showing that you can lose everything and still rise stronger. One morning, she woke to a letter from her father's old lawyer in Vietnam, informing her that the last piece of the inheritance was finalized. Emily was now the sole owner of a real estate empire in Saigon, a portfolio worth millions. She signed the documents with shaking hands, then laughed. She, the girl from the South Side, was now a global businesswoman. Daniel, meanwhile, struggled. Investors were wary. His image was tarnished. Sabrina's brief taste of fame soured as the public lost interest and moved on. Emily felt no satisfaction in their suffering. She simply moved forward, focused on her own path. She started a foundation in her mother's name, dedicated to helping immigrant women access education and legal support. She joined boards, spoke at events, mentored young lawyers, and quietly supported other women going through divorce or betrayal. But perhaps the most powerful transformation came in private moments. Reading to her unborn child, meditating by the window, laughing with friends over dinner, savoring the peace that came with knowing she owed her happiness to no one but herself. On the day the divorce was finalized, Emily stood on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and pink. She took a deep breath, hand on her belly, and whispered, "We're free." She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that gala. She was stronger, she was whole, and she was just getting started. Revenge, at its most potent, isn't loud or violent. It's public, precise, and undeniable. And it comes with a twist. The world gets to see who you really are. For weeks, the city buzzed with anticipation. Emily Sterling, now a rising figure in business and philanthropy, had all but disappeared from the social scene. Rumors spread. Was she hiding? Planning a lawsuit? Preparing to leave the country with her child and her fortune? No one could have predicted what she would do next. It started with a single, elegantly worded email, an invitation sent to every major investor, charity leader, board member, and socialite who had attended the infamous gala. The occasion, the launch of the Tron Foundation, dedicated to supporting women's financial freedom and children's education, named for her late mother. The venue, the same Imperial Grand Ballroom, booked for a dazzling spring evening. Daniel received the invite. His hands trembled when he read it. Sabrina, eager for another night in the spotlight, pushed him to attend. "It's just business," she purred. "We should show our faces. Remind everyone you're still a power couple." Daniel, desperate to salvage his reputation, agreed. The night of the gala, the ballroom gleamed even brighter than before. But this time, the energy was different. Emily arrived not as a guest, but as the host. She wore a stunning, custom-tailored dress that celebrated her pregnancy and her power, a look that was both commanding and deeply feminine. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her smile radiated genuine confidence. Guests noticed immediately. The media wasn't there to chase a scandal, but to document a movement. Influential women from across the city filled the room. Lawyers, entrepreneurs, artists, activists, many of whom Emily had quietly mentored or supported. The press snapped photos, but this time the stories were about leadership, resilience, and transformation. As the evening began, Emily took the stage, her voice calm but resonant. "Thank you for joining me tonight. We're not just raising money. We're rewriting what it means to start over. When women stand together, there's nothing we can't accomplish." The crowd erupted in applause. Daniel, standing at the edge of the room with Sabrina, tried to blend in, but people avoided his gaze. Former allies now gathered around Emily, congratulating her on her vision and courage. Some quietly whispered to Daniel, "You lost the best thing that ever happened to you." Then came the moment that would be talked about for years. The charity auction, always the highlight of the night, was about to begin. One of the items up for bid was a week-long stay at a new eco-resort in Vietnam, co-owned by Emily and managed by her father's old partners. Daniel, eager to look generous, tried to place a bid. But as he raised his hand, the auctioneer paused. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice polite but cool. "However, this auction item is reserved for individuals whose philanthropic contributions have been consistent and whose actions have reflected the spirit of this foundation. We appreciate your interest, but tonight is not your stage." A ripple of shock went through the room. Sabrina's face turned white. Daniel's cheeks burned red, his jaw clenched, but he managed a stiff nod. He realized in that instant that his money and his name no longer opened every door. The cameras caught it all. By morning, headlines read, "Emily Sterling reclaims the ballroom and the city's respect. Betrayed wife turns table on ex-husband in charity power move." Later in the evening, Emily sat with the board, publicly announcing her new role as co-chair of a multi-million-dollar startup. and the recipient of an international humanitarian award. She gave credit to her mother, her mentors, and to the friends who stood by her when the world turned its back. The real blow, though, came quietly. One by one, Daniel's investors pulled out of Sterling Dynamics, citing concerns about leadership. Some joined Emily's causes. Others offered support or investment in her foundation. Sabrina tried to salvage her social media presence, but every post was met with comments praising Emily's class and warning that other women not to trust gold diggers. As the night wound down, Emily walked through the ballroom, head high, accepting congratulations and hugs from guests, many of whom had once ignored or pitied her. A new investor, a woman who had survived her own public divorce, pressed a card into Emily's hand. "Let's build something great together," she whispered. Daniel, finally alone near the exit, caught Emily's eye. He started to speak, but she held up a hand. "No need, Daniel. You've said enough. Tonight isn't about you. It's about moving forward." She turned and left him standing in the same spot where he had once humiliated her. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Outside, as she stepped into the cool night air, Emily felt lighter than she had in years. She had taken her pain, her rage, her heartbreak, and turned them into power, purpose, and hope. The world now saw who she truly was. And as the city lights glimmered, Emily knew her best days were still ahead. The world rarely celebrates the quiet strength of women who choose to rebuild instead of destroy, who find their power not in revenge, but in becoming their best selves. Emily Sterling understood this now, more than ever. The storm had passed, the dust had settled, and in its place was a life more authentic, more beautiful, and more hers than anything she could have imagined. Months went by. The city's gossip cycle moved on, chasing newer scandals, fresher faces. But Emily's story did not fade. It resonated, quietly at first, then louder as more women reached out. Some wrote long emails confessing they were trapped in marriages where their dreams had been set aside. Others messaged her late at night, desperate for hope, for advice, for proof that there was life after heartbreak. Emily responded to as many as she could. Sometimes it was a simple, "You are stronger than you think." Other times it was sharing practical advice. Open your own bank account, keep your skills sharp, build a circle of friends who see your worth. She never offered platitudes. She offered the truth. The journey was hard, but survival was possible. Her child was born on a rain-washed morning, a baby girl with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn spirit. Emily named her Hope. In those sleepless early days, Emily rocked her daughter and whispered stories not just of what had happened, but of what could be. "You will never have to shrink yourself for anyone," she promised. "You are enough, just as you are." Her foundation thrived, helping hundreds of women and children gain access to education, legal aid, and financial resources. Emily started public speaking, standing in front of rooms full of women, lawyers, business leaders, and young girls. She shared her story honestly, never painting herself as a flawless heroine, but as a survivor and a work in progress. One evening, she stood at the front of a packed auditorium. The lights dimmed, the applause faded, and all eyes turned to her. "I was once told that women are at their most beautiful when they're silent and agreeable," Emily began, her voice steady and warm. "But silence is not strength. Agreeability is not destiny. Strength is standing in the wreckage of what you once thought was your life and building something new from the rubble. Brick by brick, tier by tier, choice by choice." She paused, letting the words settle. "I know what it's like to be erased in public. I know what it's like to lose everything and feel like nothing. But I also know what it's like to discover in your lowest moment that you are your own rescue, that no night is coming, that you are the hero of your own story." The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. "I stand here not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who decided betrayal would not define her. I am not weak for loving deeply. I am not a fool for hoping for more. But I am powerful for refusing to let pain be the end of my story." She looked out into the crowd, women of every age, background, and dream. Some had tears in their eyes, some nodded, all understood. "My message to every woman is this: you are allowed to demand respect. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to begin again, no matter how broken you feel. You are not less because someone failed to see your worth. And if you ever find yourself alone at the bottom, remember, That is where you will find your strength. A standing ovation erupted, but Emily wasn't finished. She spoke to her daughter every night, passing on the lessons she'd learned. Don't let anyone define your limits. Ask for what you deserve. Give love, but never trade your self-respect for approval. Stand up, even when your voice shakes. She forgave Daniel, not for him, but for herself, to break the last chain that tied her to the past. He would always be her daughter's father, but he would never again have power over her happiness. Emily reconnected with her roots, traveling to Vietnam to meet relatives and oversee her investments, teaching her daughter about resilience and hope. She became a global symbol for starting over, not by hiding your wounds, but by wearing them as medals of survival. She learned that real happiness wasn't in fairy tale endings or in someone else's promises. It was in late-night laughter with friends, in a business deal closed on her own terms, in her daughter's sleepy smile, in the peace that comes from trusting herself. Emily Sterling's story wasn't unique, but that was what made it powerful. It was every woman's story, everywhere. A reminder that we all have moments of devastation, but what we do next is what matters. If you're listening, whether your heart is breaking or you're standing in the aftermath, remember this. You are not weak for feeling pain. You are not foolish for loving. You are not broken beyond repair. And you do not have to wait for permission to reclaim your life. Be your own rescue. Be your own revolution. Emily Sterling did not win because she got revenge or because she became richer or more famous. She won because she found herself again, because she rose not as a victim, but as a woman who will never again be erased. And that, for every woman, is the most powerful ending of all. So the story has ended, our wonderful friends. Are you still here with us right now? If you've stayed all the way until this moment, something in Emily's journey must have touched your heart in a way that words alone can't explain. Maybe it was the betrayal, maybe it was the quiet strength, or maybe it was the moment she chose to rise, not for revenge, but for herself. Let's take a breath together and look at what this story really tells us. Life will hurt us. People we love may betray us. Circumstances will knock us down when we least expect it. But as the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Emily reacted not with rage, but with purpose. She didn't crumble in public. She reclaimed her power in silence, in action, in rebuilding brick by brick. Her message is clear, and it's for all of us. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to speak up, to protect your peace, and to rewrite your life. No one else has the right to decide when your story ends or how strong you are allowed to be. Pain is real, but it can also be fuel. As Marcus Aurelius said, the obstacle is the way. Sometimes what breaks us also reveals us. So if you're in a storm right now, know this. You're not alone. You are not broken beyond repair. Like Emily, you are your own rescue. You don't need anyone's permission to start again. If this story spoke to something deep in you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind you of your own strength. Let's keep telling these truths together.